Welcome into another episode of Board Talk with Phil. Tonight I'm joined with the ever-talented, the musician, the AI expert, the board ape, Jeff Nicholas. Jeff, how are you this evening?
I'm good. It's funny you say a musician because I'm not. And we'll
Oh,
get into that. We can get into that a little bit. But I'm really stoked to be here. Yeah,
I
thanks for
can
having me.
I cannot wait to dive into that talk now. So, Jeff, I think the first thing that we'll jump into before we talk music, because now I'm really intrigued with some of the questions I already have prepped. Let's talk board talk. Board ape.
Yeah.
The phenomenon of minting board apes. I heard you talk that you were on the pre-sale list, I believe. And so you were one of the first like 200 or something that minted.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, so there was no pre-sale list at the time. It was just pre-sale. So
Oh, yeah.
the way it went down was like pre-reveal was pre-sale. Right.
Right.
And like nobody minted, like because nobody knew about the project. And it just like came across my timeline and I was like, this is ridiculous in all the best ways. Like I just loved the sort of irreverency of it all.
Yes.
So I was like, I'll mint one, whatever. And then what people don't realize about that time is, pre-sale meant it was pre-reveal. Then that Friday it started revealing, and that's when everybody started buying. There was no like allow list. There was no like built up hype. They were trying, but they couldn't get any traction. And then it just like caught fire.
And I was definitely one of those that I had seen it on the timeline. I had actually shared it with a couple like bigger streamers at the time that I was following in the Top Shot land. And I was like, hey, this is cool. The Schiller, shout out to the Schiller. He's one that's been here from day one. And he's like, oh man, he was a friend at the time. He's like, I don't really like getting tagged in this. They're doing a giveaway. It's so funny to think about that now. That
they were like the first ones to do those giveaways.
Yeah. And everyone was like, I don't know. It looks okay. And then that Friday, it was late at night here in Dallas, Fort Worth. And I remember I minted one, and the rest is history, I guess. And so again, they started revealing, like you said, the art, I think, brought people in as well because it was super vibey and people liked what they saw. Would you agree with that?
Well, it's for sure. It's interesting. You came from the Top Shot side. So I witnessed this, and because I didn't know much about Top Shots, but now all of a sudden there were all these Top Shot folks in the mix with all of us weird artists that were doing art NFTs. And that's what happened. Like I got super hooked into the art and the story and just something about it. Right. And when they revealed, I started running into our clubhouse rooms as my ape.
Yeah.
And being like, yo, this thing, check this out. And people were like, what are you talking about? What is that? You know? And then people would go just out of like curiosity, go mint one and be like, whoa, I got this crazy, cheetah fur, like whatever.
Yeah.
And then it just ran. So it ran from two sides. It was like Top Shots came in because of Pranksy and everybody and Jimmy. And then we came in on the art side, and it just kind of like mind melded.
It was the perfect storm for real. It was like the absolute perfect storm. I remember I had looked at it a little bit, and then when I finally decided to mint again, I agree with you. It was kind of like the ridiculousness of the roadmap, like pay back our moms, and there's going to be merch. And at the time, it was like, sweet merch. I'm freaking down for some merch. Now you think about it, and you're like, no one cares about the merch. But back then, I was stoked to see a project that actually wanted to give you something.
Yeah. I mean, it was one of those things. Like it just kind of like, to me, it made me feel like a kid again.
Yes.
And it was like, and it was cheap enough. It was 0.08. You were like, I'll just get one of these things. And then like on that Friday, I ended up minting 7, 8. And it was like I would like go to Coinbase, pull a little bit more money, convert it, mint one, and be like, oh, I don't know if I should have done that, but fuck, I'll do another one. And the only reason I stopped at 8 was because like after that hemming and hawing and like whatever, and it was like poof, it's sold out. And we're like, well, okay, I guess we'll go to bed.
Because it was in the middle of the night. That's the thing. It was absolutely in the middle of the night. I remember being in the Discord, and like Blau and Pranksy and Gary V came in that night. They're like, oh, I minted whatever 100, I minted 20.
Yeah.
And it was
Lindsay and I were sitting on our floor in our living room, and Lindsay would mint one and I would mint one and she would mint one. And like she minted that trippy, the Madonna ape as it's called. Like she minted that, and it was like no one knew. And people were like aesthetics, rarity, commercial rights, like
right. None of that.
Now look at it.
Yeah.
It's funny because at the time you mentioned talking to those streamers and then being like, I don't know, I'm not down with that. Our founder at Warp Sound, I was like, dude, this is happening and we get commercial rights to the IP. We need to buy one. And he was like, I don't think I can explain this to like our investors, like there's no way we can spend like this amount of money on this ape. It was just like a couple thousand at the time when I positioned it to him. And then like weeks later, he's like, dude, we fucked up. We should have gotten an ape. And
the ball.
So when mutants happened, he was the first one to hit me on the Slack, and he was like, we have to get a mutant right now.
Yeah, do not wait. Go fire. That is hilarious. And again, you bring up IP, you bring up rarity. It legitimately didn't matter. We were just like, oh my God, cool. Like I remember I got my I'm still rocking the PFP to this day. I got a Halo ape, and I was like, that's so cool. And it had pink fur and an orange background. And it was just so like wild that I was like, this is awesome. I didn't care that it wasn't rare. Like it was just such a different time, such a different time. You were just vibing. And like you said, this perfect storm of art people, sport, Top Shot, maybe gambling ish as well, all kind of came into one. And then like the rest is history. Cause I feel like the next couple of weeks like flew by, and it was people creating derivatives and people like helping each other out. And it was Clubhouse. I remember going into Clubhouse. And
Clubhouse was wild because it was like we were Bumani, who was a Clubhouse celebrity at the time, because his face was the Clubhouse app. That's why people knew him. He was coming in and playing music, and he had like ape sounds going on behind him. And we were all just making ape sounds. Like you'd go into a Clubhouse room and it was nothing but apes making ape sounds with Bumani playing like super chill music. It was like the wildest thing. And then they launched the Lo-Fi channel. And so it was like everything about it was just like, we are just vibing, you know, and so when you start from that base, I think it just started from a place of like real naivety, I think, in a lot of ways, like even on the founder's side. Right.
Yep.
And it was like, this is fun. We just all feel like kids again. Yes. And that base like sets you up for it to be able to be something big, you know.
It's like such a simple thing when you think about it, but man, like honing in on what is fun and what makes that go, it's kind of a mystery, because they really just like great founders, of course, 100%. They were getting into something they had no clue where it was going. Community came together, and it was just this perfect mixing pot. Now everyone's trying to duplicate it, and the thing is like that's like a once in a blue moon, right? Like it comes around once in a while.
I remember DMing with Garga. It was like the day after Mint in the Discord. And I was like immediately like, yo, we need to make an ape that plays lo-fi AI beats. Like that's the thing. And I hit him with that. And he's like, dude, I have no idea what you're talking about, number one. And I don't even know where my head's at. Like they were just like, what just happened? You know? And so it's been really funny to see them on the journey too, like the community on the journey and them on the journey. Like it's a parallel thing that's happening, and watching them build this business that has turned into the machine, you know, the Yuga Labs thing that it is now. You're like, yeah, they're just kind of following the passion. They're like following the gut on like what's fun. What do people want to do? You know,
I just feel like every time you hear anyone talk about them in general, like interactions they've had, it's always just like A+ people, A+ vision. And it's like laser focused on this community built project, and like taking it to like, again, none of us knew that we'd be talking about heavy metals and freaking other side and like all these million things. It's just crazy to think about.
Well, I just remember being in these rooms when in the Clubhouse rooms, like it was like probably the next day, and we were like, they say commercial rights, like what does this mean? And having these Clubhouse discussions of like, what do you think that means? Like, what can we actually do with it? And them having to post in the Discord like a disclaimer in the announcements of being like, this is what we mean by commercial rights. You have the rights to do whatever you want with it, you know. And just like thinking about it and going like, do you think there'll ever be like a restaurant? Do you think there'll ever be like really? Like, would that actually be a thing? And fast forward, and you got Bored and Hungry, and you got, you know, like so many community. The ecosystem is so big. I've just been at Ape Maxi since day one because I was like, it brought people together. It made me feel like a kid, and we can all thrive, you know.
100%. It's and they like have supported people along the way. The founders, they've been very supportive of and you know, shining light on the amazing things that are happening. And you're right, there's so many different things now. Only 2 years from its creation. Like now, let's put it down another year, 2 years from now. Like I don't know, sky's the limit. It's been a fun ride, and I think that's the key. Is it's just been super, super fun.
Yep.
So Jeff, the non-musician, I got some questions for you, because I am a musician. I grew up in a music household. Both my parents are retired music teacher. So I think I probably had to be in music. I loved it, but I probably would have been like disowned if I didn't like music. So when you were growing up, like, have you always been into, I would say, just the creative side, like the arts in general? Is that something
Yeah.
that interests you?
Yeah. So for me, it started when I was a kid, through illustration, but really when my mom brought a Tandy computer home, and it was like, I'm like really dating myself, but it was like, mid 90s. And there was like, I found BBSs somehow, I don't even know. And then I found like these ANSI art packs. And I found this program, the Draw, where you could make, pixel art basically out of blocks in ANSI. And as soon as I found that, it brought together my weird, like tech sort of curiosity with art. And I immediately was like, computer art, that's my thing. At the same time, like I've always been like a huge music fan. When I moved from Richmond, Virginia to Florida, when I went to the store to buy like back to school clothes, I went and bought like Ministry shirts and Jane's Addiction and Nirvana, and they're wearing all like surf shit. And so I was like the weird like goth music kid from up north that moved in, and so it was always this thing. And so like over time as a kid, those things just became more and more the passion. And I just did everything I could to follow either, music or art. And it led me to some pretty interesting places over pretty quickly, actually.
Yeah. So like, do you have family members that are interested in the arts as well? Like, did it feel like a household that was just like oozing of, I don't know, like creative thought in general?
Not really. No. I mean, that's the
Crazy.
thing.
Yeah.
My mom, she was told when she was young, this is so super sad. She was told when she was young that she couldn't sing and
Mm,
that she couldn't carry a tune. So she never sang again. And
mm.
so, and for her, it really like kind of turned her off to music too. And so there was this, like, my household was actually quiet except for my loud room.
Yeah.
Right. And
Yeah.
she ended up going to becoming a minister. And so that was part of why we moved to Florida. She started working at a church. And so she actually got into like real Christian music and was always trying to push like the Christian rap and stuff on
Yeah.
me.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so that was like the extent of the support from
Right.
from my mom,
Right.
But for me, it really was like I was just felt really driven to pursue that. What I found out later, like my dad and I were estranged for a long time, and when I finally reconnected with him, he was in Indiana. He was telling me about working in a recording studio when he was
Mm.
a kid, and he was like super driven by music and was never able to make a career out of it. So it's pretty funny, actually. I think there's obviously like a creative bone in the family, but I
Sure.
didn't know about it until much, much later.
That's crazy. Cause again, like you see a lot of these people that are, creative people messing around the arts, et cetera, that like, it's like, oh, my grandpa was this and my great grandma was this. And so to hear your side of the story, that's just so interesting that you were still able to dive in and you said it was tech too. Like you were very much into the tech side.
Yeah. Well, that was the thing. Like, I didn't really like, I immediately fell into computer art and
Mhm.
experimentation. And that's what it was about for me. Like, I wasn't a great illustrator. I'm still not today, but when it came to like finding new technology and ways to make it creative, like I remember when I first got a copy of Photoshop, I wasn't using it for photo editing. I was using all the filters in it and doing like uh, different art with it,
Mm.
mainly fractal art. And
Yeah.
so I was like using the filters to like take colors and take like a blank palette and make a bunch of weird fractal art. And so like for me, that was like, that's not the intended use of that tool. But let's go ahead and use it that way. And so I've always been driven by that. Like it's
Yeah.
been like, give me a new tool. When I found VR and shooting VR, it was early days of like strapping GoPro cameras together. And so that's not, there was no purpose built camera for it at the time. We literally rubber banding GoPros, six
Yeah.
of them, and then hand stitching it. So it's like, I don't know. I've just always been drawn to that edge, right? Like where art and technology come together.
And it's so funny you talk about the AR and VR because again, I was listening to some of your other talks and you kind of mentioned that you guys were definitely on the bleeding edge of like what AR and VR are starting to become now.
Yeah.
And what was it like to be, maybe looked at as semi crazy at the time, like believing in this thing that was not really a thing yet?
Yeah, I mean, I was running at the time a creative agency that I had built with my partner, from the two of us designing like album packages and posters to 4 locations, like 40 employees. Like it was a big shop. I mean, in our view, it was a big shop.
Yeah,
Comparatively, it was a kind of a small shop, but going from 2 people to 40 was a lot. And all of a sudden, this guy, Anthony Batt, comes in and he's like, you guys, the content you make is great. I think you'll love this VR thing. And I'm like, I don't know what you mean, man. And he showed me the camera rigs, and I immediately was like, I need to be a part of this. And so, yeah, everybody looked at us like we were crazy. My whole company, I was the CEO, co-founder, and now I'm off running like a VR thing. And they're like, dude, are you okay? You know? And I ended up leaving that agency because of that, actually.
Yeah.
Like they wanted to keep going down the road of real traditional like music videos and stuff. And I was like, I think VR is the future. I was repped at UTA for it. And I started making content, and I got picked up by Live Nation to do direct VR content for them. And luckily I took a gig at Live Nation instead of going like pure VR storyteller, because the bottom fell out. Like there was this little bubble and the bottom just fell right out. And I at least had like a base then to work in. Like it turned from VR to AR, then it turned from AR to, you know, the next innovation. And it just kept going and keeps going, right? Like into Web3, into AI. And it just like, so that early stage technology train just runs, and it goes to the next thing, and it bubbles up, and it hits like a big high, like a momentary high, and then it drops into a trough, and then 4 or 5 years later it comes comes back as like a real product. And that's what's happening with AR VR right now. Like we're going to see it on Monday.
That's right.
Apple's announcement, right? They're going to announce a headset. We all know that at this point. And so but that, like, we were talking about it and making content for it like 8 years ago,
that's
5
crazy.
years ago. So like, I think when people look at Web3 and they go, oh, NFTs are over or whatever, you're like, no, man, like it's not. It's just that there's a hype cycle, and we're just in the trough of that hype cycle, like waiting for it to mature and for all the bad juju to get sort of shaken out.
Yeah, for sure.
And
we're starting to do that
mainstream comes in. Yeah.
No, for sure. So like, I guess when I listen to you talk, and even talk to you now, what jumps out to me is that you, at least to me, it feels like you have no fear in like going for the next innovative thing. Like you're like striving and searching almost for that next thing that can continue to push technology, the arts, the space forward. What is that semi accurate? I feel like you have zero fear.
It's somewhat accurate. There is actually a lot of fear there, but I just push through it.
Right.
because there's the opportunity of creating something new and finding a new way to like enrich lives or tell stories or whatever. Like that, I'm driven so much more by that. Like that's a bigger drive than the fear that steps in. Right.
Yeah.
And so usually what happens is I get like a spark of something, and then I'm like, let me do a little real research on this. And then next thing I know, I fell all the way into the well, and I'm like, well, I guess I'm here now. And this, you know, so like there's nothing else to do than follow it. It's what happened with Web3 and NFTs for me. Like a friend at Interscope Records was like, hey, there's this thing happening. I think you'd be into it. And I was like, man, I don't understand. I can just right click save. Like, I don't get it. And then as soon as he explained it to me, he sent me a couple of videos, explained it to me. I was like, oh, wait a minute. This is like revolutionary. And then like my whole life became, you know,
right into the hole
of that. Yeah. Because for me, it's never been about like all this stuff. I think a lot of people follow like what's going to make me money.
Sure.
And that's a totally viable drive in someone. And I'd probably be a lot more successful if that was my drive, but it isn't. It's been more around like, how do we continue to tell different stories in different ways? I'm fascinated by that.
Yeah. So it's the story of it all. Like how do you tell a great story?
Yeah. And I mean, it really, like if I look at my history of creative like journey, it started in print. Well, it started digital, and then it went to print because like, oh, look, this poster that can go like wheat paste somewhere. And then it turned into like, you know, album packages and stuff for digital that you're telling a story. And then it turned into like web experiences because, oh, now I can tell an interactive story. And then it turned into video content because I was like, one frame's boring. Like, let's tell a real story, right? And like multi-frame. And then that VR, like now I can immerse you in the story, right? So it's just deeper and deeper levels of like my experience has grown, my life experience has grown, and then this next thing allows me to kind of take the storytelling further.
I love that. And I think it also makes sense why you're really, really thoroughly enjoying the Yacht Club, because I would say that they're masters of weaving a great story and pushing things forward all the time.
Totally. Yeah. And that's like I can't let go of any of the Yuga assets.
Yeah.
I'm not one of those flippers who's just like, you know, I probably could have made a hell of a lot of money if I had like ridden the waves.
Yeah.
I just can't do it. I'm like, that's my ape. These are my assets. We're going to be on this road together. You know,
this is your story, right? It's the story of Jeff with Yuga. I mean, that's true though. Like we were all creating our own like individual story, which I think is beautiful. So kind of talking more about specifically Warp Sound and Web3. My first question is, why virtual artists? Like why do we want virtual artists?
Yeah. So when Chris, our founder, started Authentic, he and I had met when he was at Oculus running music for them, and I was at Live Nation. And both of us were pretty fed up with like the corporate structures that we were in, but he got fed up first and was like, this is crazy. Facebook is crazy. I'm out.
Right.
And was just kind of searching. And like, you know, he's a lifelong musician, he's played violin his whole life. He's also a big burner. So he's built like a ton of stuff out at Burning Man, sound systems, DJ'd parties. He DJ'd for Prince at one point. Like, you know, that's been his world. And also this convergence of technology. So he was like, I think we can make music with AI, but no one cares. And everyone thinks that I'm crazy. So there's also this thing around virtual influencers happening. And it's becoming clear that in the metaverse that we were, you know, really kind of straddling at the time with Oculus and all the performances and stuff, that virtual beings are going to be a thing. It's not like a maybe. It's like we're going to have experiences that like we walk into, and there's, whether they're NPCs or they actually have their own lives, the virtual beings are a thing. Lil Michaela was hot at the time. And so he was like, if I take AI music and build a team that tries to create a musical AI, and I package it through a virtual artist, it's now all of a sudden palatable, like more palatable for someone to go, oh, that virtual artist made a zeros and ones, made that music with zeros and ones. Got it. Right. So that's where that started. And it was really like, it really was a virtual artist thing, as the sort of, and AI music was in support of that. The music got to a place where it was so good, it was starting to get so good that it started to flip that scale a little bit. And it went, do we want to become a content company that's just creating virtual artists and identity and stuff that's really like a one-to-many exchange?
Right.
Or do we want to create, you know, like follow the AI music thing and turn it into something where everybody can play with it and create what they want out of it? And so that was that started to shift, you know, probably around the same time we launched the Warps project, because decentralization had crept into our minds, and this whole idea around like, we don't love the Web 2 model of I make thing, push it out to you. We wanted to empower others to be part of the journey. So that's a long-winded way of answering like why virtual artists, but it's like, it really was like, it was a way in, and there's still a huge part of what we do. Right now they're taking a little bit of a backseat because, as we like to say, they're in the studio, they're in the lab.
Right. They're working on their craft.
Exactly.
So I assume, and maybe I'm wrong in my assumption, that younger generations, this idea of virtual artists, this idea of AI in general, and definitely in the music scene, it makes more sense to them. Is that accurate?
Totally. Yeah.
Just because they've kind of grown up in it.
Yeah. I look at my kids, right? I have a 12-year-old and an 8-year-old, and they're in, when they're not at school, they're in Roblox or, you know, some other version of a metaverse, like all the time. Right. And until I take the iPad from them.
Right.
And in those worlds, like, they're interacting with each other, but they're also interacting with NPCs and, you know, all kinds of virtual beings. And it has become a digital town square for them in a way that is hard for an adult to grasp, because you're like, wait a minute, like you go out and hang with your friends. And they're like children of the pandemic too, right? Like, so they're like, no, our friends we all hang out here. And even when they have friends come over, what do? They both go on iPads into the digital world and play, right? So I just think, like long term, is that good or bad? I don't really know for development. But here we are, and it's not like our world is going to get less technical and less digital. It's just continuing it's continuing that pace, right? So
yeah, I think we need to work to understand it, right? Like we can't just sit here and stuck in the mud. It's going to continue to innovate as we move forward and become literally every day for everyone.
I think what people don't realize, adults don't realize, is that when we talk about like, oh, but go outside with your friends, like go experience the world, like why so digital? Like we literally sound like our parents who were like, man, I went to the festival and so, I went to Woodstock or like whatever their experience was with life. And they had this nostalgia for what it meant to be in youth. Like that's what we sound like, because these kids are like, I literally don't know a world where an iPad didn't exist.
Yeah.
Right. Or streaming wasn't a thing, or the metaverse talk wasn't, right? So when we can understand that, then we can understand like why this stuff actually matters to them. And pretty soon, like the current generation of kids are going to be, spending. They're going to be making money and spending money, and they're used to spending money digitally, buying things with Robux and whatever other digital currency they're using in game. And they're also really bummed that they can't take that dress or those shoes or whatever with them from one platform to the next. So it's almost like an inevitability, everything we've been talking about in Web3, even in, whether you look at the crypto side or you look at the digital goods side or authentication or interoperability, like to them, they're like, duh.
Yeah.
They're like, Dad, you and your NFT talk is silly, because they're like, of course, right?
This is things, these are ideas and concepts we've been talking about and just living in for years.
Yeah. It's just like, it's like the old guy thing to say NFTs, right?
Yeah, it really is. It really is. So you kind of talked a little bit about obviously younger generation understanding AI art, but what about specifically musicians? Have musicians taken AI music well? What's the reception been like in your experience so far?
Yeah, AI in general is obviously a really hot topic. It's a very divisive topic, right? In music in particular, I think when people hear AI music right now, most of what they're thinking of is like fake Drake, fake Weeknd, right? Like it's really what they're talking about is deep fake, audio deep fake.
Yes.
And that is AI. There is an AI that created the voice to sound exactly like Drake, like it was trained to sound like that. But that's not AI composing music. That's a human, doing a deep fake. So I think like it's really important when we have the conversations around AI music with artists that we draw that distinction, because that stuff is there, and I have mixed feelings about it. I'll talk about that in a second. But then there's also the like AI as a tool, AI composing music, AI as a compositional layer. And that's really where artists start to realize the power of it, because they're like, oh, wait a minute, like this can start an idea for me, or it can be a collaborator. It's in the same way that I might pick up a synth or, pick up Pro Tools or like whatever new technology is coming that allows me to do something new.
Yeah.
AI music offers that ability when it's the compositional side of things. The AI voice thing is interesting because like I talk about this a lot because I think it's really relevant and really important. Like when people started doing remixes and started doing mashups and started using samples, it broke the music industry in a lot of ways, right? At the time, it was like, wait, can you do that? And you can't do that, right? And like all this regulation got passed around sample rights, and and this is just, it's today's version of that disruption, that deep fake, mimicry, whatever you want to call it. It is sampling someone's voice and creating your own thing with it. And yeah, there's like some ethical concerns around using someone's voice, but also it's remix culture. This generation has grown up in remix culture. And so of course it's going to happen, right? Yeah. And regulation is going to get passed. And like that part, I do understand why artists are scared, because they're like, but my livelihood might be my voice. And if you can just copy it, what do I have?
Yeah, right.
And our answer to that is, usually like, well, it's your voice. It is your voice. And right now you don't have protection, but you will at some point. Like you will have to. That's just going to come, right?
Yep. No, it will. And like you said, it's a tool. It's just another tool. There's been many tools before, and there will be more tools ahead, and you got to figure out how to use them. If you do not look into how to use them and it be a benefit for you, then you're going to get passed by. That's just life in general across many industries. If you can adapt, you're in trouble. And so that's, again, as a musician, I can appreciate how AI, I like how you said it's almost like it is collaborative, but it's also a brainstorming technique. Like if you can have an AI that's able to create things, you might find something, a little snippet, a little piece in there that now inspires you to take it and, run with it in a way that you see fit.
The way that we look at it, the way that I look at it personally is AI music, the compositional side, like what we're doing with Warp Sound, where the AI and the machine learning system is composing music in real time and building, songs that are studio quality. Like what that allows you to do is, sure, you can just use it and create a beat and create a song and just use that out the gate, right? Like that's cool.
Yeah.
What that might do is actually bring someone who didn't think that they were musical at all into music, and all of a sudden they're like, cool, I made this thing. But where it really shines, like that's going to be what it is. Mm-hmm. Where it really shines is when someone grabs it, someone with like real talent grabs it and goes, cool, now I'm going to use it and I'm going to stack on top of it. I'm going to put it in my own composition and we're going to make something new out of it.
Right.
Because it's just a tool. Like there's this great Bjork video where she's like back in the 90s where people were so mad at electronic music and they were like, electronic music has no soul. Right. And she was like, you're pointing at the wrong thing. You're pointing at the computer saying the computer has no soul. She's like, of course it doesn't. No one put a soul in there.
Right.
And it requires, that touch to like actually create some art. I think anything that advances that makes art easier to make for the masses just makes the end result output art even better for those that have significant talent. So if the world gets more beautiful and sounds better at its base, and then we get better art on top of that, like I'm all for that.
That seems like a plus for all. And I would agree. You're still going to be able to shine above that just because everybody can use AI. Everybody has tools. Who is the person that's able to really shine and bring them out? It's going to be still very obvious at the end of the day. It will be.
And what happens when all this new technology comes, like every time it comes, there's like a flood of content and people are like, oh my God, this is the craziest thing you've ever seen. And then you get to a point of desensitization with it where you're like, oh, right, that's AI art. That's what that is. Right. And it just becomes like, there's so much of it. Then you really look for what rises to the top out of that, and it just happens every time. I'm old enough to know, like, I sound like I'm really fucking old. I'm not that old, but I've been around long enough to know and see this.
A lot of experience. I would agree for sure.
Yeah. That you just realize that like, it's all cyclical and like, we're going to be okay. Like it always builds and shit gets weird. Shit gets disrupted. People do lose jobs. People find new jobs, like new things emerge. It's just, it's almost like evolution of technology mixed with humanity, right?
No, for sure. I want to jump into Warp Sound a little bit more because one thing that I also appreciate with the project, and I'd like you to, expand a little bit on what the project is, but at the simplest form, I think about this all the time when I'm doing streams, talking with people. I'm sharing the other side when we go into a first and second trip and I'm streaming it to everybody. And I think to myself, shit, this would be really cool if I had some music that I wouldn't get in trouble for. And so at its simplest form, Warp Sound and what you guys are doing allows those owners to have music that you can play on streams, if you're a gamer, if you're, have a talk show, whatever it may be. And so again, at its simplest form, AI music and what you're doing with Warp Sound to me is just a massive add for all content creators.
That's one of the things we look at. We're kind of bringing music where there isn't music currently. We're not displacing music, because actually what we're saying is like, because of the performance royalties and because of the rights and restrictions around DMCA takedowns and all that stuff, people can't use music the way that they want to. And so this allows that's one of the use cases. The way that we look at it with Warp Sound, what we're building is an adaptive AI music system. And so the whole point with that is it's an AI music system that can generate music that's studio quality, that uses audio fingerprints to give it a sort of shape and a feel and a vibe, so you can really kind of customize what it's going to sound like. But the AI is composing and building that beat in real time. The adaptive part of it is where a lot of the real power comes from, because it's not just, hey, make me a beat, wait 3 seconds, beat gets made, it's recorded, and that's done. It's no, this music is evolving and streaming and being composed in real time, and you can change it and you can adapt it in real time using all kinds of different inputs. So one of the demos we just launched was text to music, right? It's playing, make it sound more like, Mozart, or
I saw that. Yeah.
And it'll change in real time. Like that's what that's doing. But also in a game or a stream environment, right? Like, hey, everybody emote with this, everybody move right, everybody move left. Like, I just racked up so many points, whatever it is, that music can be evolving and adapting in real time. So instead of it being just a backing track, that's just a soundtrack to your experience, the music can become a central, part of the experience. And I just think that we, like long-term vision, like we just think that it just enriches people's lives and their connection to music. And if you can change someone's connection to music where it's not just something they listen to, it's something they participate in, you fire up a whole new segment of the brain. And that allows you to open up with more empathy. It allows you to do all kinds of things that not having access to that part of yourself, doesn't allow for. So anyway, that gets super deep and like,
dude, I was just
the rationale why, but
I'm sitting here smiling from ear to ear, because everything you said makes sense. And I had so many notes, and you literally just went through them all. Because I have a question on here. Why does music have to just be a soundtrack? Because I heard you talk about it. Like, why is that all it has to be? It can be so much more.
Well, and I think we get stuck in these as humans. We get stuck in these, like, this is the way it's done.
Yeah.
And music is one of those, because if you really think about the modality of music, how it's distributed, how it's recorded, like everything about it is sort of based in this structure of, well, it needed to be 2 minutes because that's like the airtime that you had in the Motown radio stations. Yeah. It needed to be 12 tracks because that's what fit on an LP, right? Like, and so we're carrying all this baggage of like, music is this. But if you go into like jazz and you go into like a producer's studio and how they're actually making music, it's not that they're like, I'm going to lay out this 2-minute track and we're going to fill in some are sure. Like that. We're going to fill in the gaps. But usually you've got like an Ableton session where there's like a drum patch over here that they did, a synth thing up here on the timeline. It's just this giant timeline of like all kinds of experimentation that's at some point comes together. And like, so if we're stuck in this old school modality, like we need to change it, because there's so much more creativity that can happen when music is just evolving, right? Yeah. So, one of our lead audio engineer, Steve, comes from harmonics. He was there working on Rock Band and Guitar Hero and stuff, but he's also a lifelong jazz musician. Like he's in jazz clubs in Nashville, every other weekend playing jazz.
Right.
And so like when you start to piece that together, like our AI engineer Blake is a composer in college. He was composing sheet music, right? Like you're like, got it, right? Like we're fusing technology with music making at its like fundamental level to allow for like infinite streams of just like creativity, right?
That's exactly
right. And then you can chop that up. You can save it, record it, do whatever you want with it. But at its fundamental base, it's just like, just let it flow.
Like life in general should be as creative and collaborative of what you just explained. Like we should all be creative together just in life day to day.
Unfortunately, like money gets in the way.
100%.
Like, that's you know what I mean. Yeah. Whenever I think about like universal basic income and like you see all these things lately where people are like, a generalized AI is gonna take all the jobs. And
all of them are gone.
They're all the jobs are gone. And now because of that, we have to have universal basic income because no one can work because the AIs all work. Right. And if we have that, then we'll all just be creative all the time because we want. It's such a weird like dystopian utopia, right? Like it's not going to work that way. But at its fundamental core, like when you can get into a flow state, you hear about this in business all the time. You get into a flow state, a creative gets into the zone, a football player is in his zone. Like all of that is just tapping into like just flowing with creativity or the moment, right?
I think that's just geniuses in whatever field they are. That's what they get. They get into that moment, and then
they're able to tap into it.
Yeah, it is, and that's a superpower. That's 100% a superpower.
Yeah, and I think that we all have, you know, versions of that. Yeah, there's people who are like above and beyond and will never touch that, but we all have versions of that. We just at some point in life it gets stifled, and if we can reignite it in some way, I think that's the beauty of what's happening in AI across visual medium and music. Is like it's reigniting that sort of childlike wonder in people that maybe lost it. And all of a sudden they're like, I can put in a prompt and like make a thing.
Yeah.
And I feel like a genius, and it just like lifts them up. Right. And I think, I don't know, I'm really bullish on what's happening with AI in the creative side. I am fearful about where some of the more generalized AI stuff is able to go, because you put that in the wrong hands and like, you got the Terminator.
Yeah,
you know,
100%. We have the Terminator in real life.
So, you know, like we do have to be really careful, and there is like serious regulation that needs to get put in, but people have this misnomer that all AI is the same, like that this creative AI is going to somehow be able to turn into the Terminator. And it's not, it doesn't work that way. It's not,
they're going to hit
generalized intelligence.
Beats, dude.
It just knows how to learn music. Or it just knows how to learn how to make art. It can't start talking.
No, that's great. Two more things for you, Jeff, then we'll wrap the conversation. So if somebody was looking into Warp Sound, where would you direct them if they wanted to join the journey of the Warp Sound crew?
Yeah, first thing, go to warpsound.ai. That gives the full breakdown of the technology and then the collection that was spawned from it.
Yeah.
The one of the things that we've had to do over the last year is start to educate around the difference between our NFT collection and the core underlying technology.
Sure.
And so warpsound.ai helps with that.
Yeah. That's beautiful. And most importantly, Jeff, what the fuck is a coda?
I have no idea. I did see Spencer from Yuga just tweeted something about a Tamagotchi.
I did see that as well.
I'm like, that looks very similar to where we're going with codas.
100%. There was some things implied there, I believe. So, man, Jeff, this was an awesome conversation. Man, I'd love to talk again. All the love to you. Congratulations on the heavy metal 5-hour AI soundtrack. I've been vibing. I showed my classes that. I showed my 6th grade music class that. I showed them Warp Sound, the website, because to me, what you're doing, what the team's doing is just, it's really honestly wonderful, because I agree, if we could all be a little bit more creative in our day-to-day, I think we'd all be a little bit better at the end of the day.
Thanks for having me. I'm down to come anytime.
All right. Again, thank you, Jeff.
All right.